It's time for the Kim Hammer Show, where you'll learn how your state government affects you, your family, and community. Here's Kim Hammer.
Good Saturday afternoon. Hope you're having a great day and enjoying your weekend. Thank you for joining me here on the Kim Hammer Show. Just always remind you, if you want to view any content that we may reference today to get put up on the website, it's the KimHammerShow.com, www.thekimhammershow.com, and you can go up there and keep track with things that I think might be of relevance, of importance, that you might be interested in following along, or you just get on the social media platform and follow me there, as well as on the podcast. This show will be played up on the podcast as well, and so you have opportunity just to go back and listen to this or share it with your friends. I'm joined in studio today with Senator Missy Irvin, and may be joined on the phone here a little bit by Senator Bart Hester, who is the incoming pro tem for the Senate, and possibly Jonathan Dismain, the chair of budget, that helped craft and navigate, along with Representative Joe Jett, the recent tax package that was passed this past week in a special session. The governor signed in on Thursday, but we're going to start off by talking about the education bill dealing with school safety that Senator Missy Irvin was the sponsor of on the Senate side. Senator Irvin, thanks for joining me on the Kim Hammer Show.
Thank you so much, Senator Hammer. It's great being with you, and great to be able to just share about this big endeavor that we were able to accomplish.
Yep.
On behalf of your listeners, I just want to tell you I'll thank you and for listening, and thanks for tuning in and caring about the issues for our state. So the school safety legislation was an appropriation bill, so that required legislative action for us to move $50 million from the state surplus over into a new fund within the restricted reserve fund. So what that means is we created a school safety fund and placed that $50 million there. Restricted reserve requires Arkansas Legislative Council's approval and a 3/5 vote before we spend that money and authorize that and approve that. So that will set up a process where the Department of Ed will bring forward some rules and regulations on a grant program to achieve school safety for all of our schools to be able to apply for those grants. And then that approval will come through Legislative Council, and then we'll go from there.
So let's back up, and for those that don't hang around the Capitol like you and I do, let's back up a little bit. We'll kind of, and before I do though, we just went through redistricting, and you've got a new district coming.
do.
Well, it'll start January 1st, but I know you're already active in it.
Yeah.
And that's kind of like all of us, you know, you're active in your old district
Yes.
while you're trying to get active in your new district.
Yeah.
What's the boundaries of your new district, just so everybody knows where you
So
are geographically?
I grew up in Little Rock, but I live in Mountain View. So I have all of Stone County, all of Searcy County, all of Van Buren County. So I got Marshall, St. Joe, the Buffalo River. I've got parts of Cleburne County, Fairfield Bay, and then all of Van Buren County, so Clinton, B Branch, that area, and then Faulkner County is new to me, and all the rural areas of Faulkner County pretty much. I just don't have Conway and Mayflower, but I have Greenbrier and Spring Hill and Wooster and Valonia and Toadsuck and all those wonderful little places. I love it. It's super fun. Guy, and it's just really a great district. Lots of great, and I also have Newton County, Marble Falls, and portions of Newton County, so we could kind of keep the Buffalo River kind of all in one district.
Intact, which is a good thing.
Yeah.
I don't know if you know or not, but I graduated Southside B Branch.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
so
it's
you,
a great school.
Yeah, represent the school I
Yeah.
graduated from, and I
yeah.
think they were glad to get rid of me. But anyway,
And Senator Hester, Bart Hester,
Yes.
his dad was a superintendent at Heber Springs, and then I think he was also there at Southside B Branch.
a small world getting smaller.
Yeah, I know. It's really fun when your colleagues, family members are part of your constituents.
Yep.
It makes it a lot of fun. It makes it a very small world.
It does.
But anyway, it's just great to be with you. But I think just knowing those districts and what I currently serve right now goes all the way to Missouri. So I have so many small rural schools, and for me, this school safety grant program really should be about achieving a standard of safety, no matter the size of your school, no matter where your school is located, whether it's in an urban area or whether it's a rural area. It's really just about trying to set some standards of school safety based on national standards and based on experts that are creating those standards through our School Safety Commission, but also the folks that have worked these cases at Parkland and at Columbine and at Sandy Hook. We have the opportunity to really set some standards, and this grant program, I think, will be the first piece of that.
Right. So, and one thing people need to understand, or would like to explain, excuse me, is we have a large surplus in our budget right now, which is due to fiscal conservative budgeting practices that have put us in a position as a state to be fiscally sound so that we can, when there is a need that rises to the level such as school safety, be able to, with a 3/5 vote, be able to get that money out of there.
Right.
Which is basically what we've done. We've just said, here's $50 million out of this that we think has risen to the level that we need to appropriate it, park it to the side
Right.
in order to be able to pay for the design that will be forthcoming. Fair
Yes.
characterization?
Yes, very fair characterization. So we're building that grant program right now, and there's a survey that's been sent out to kind of create an assessment of the schools and where they're at, what they got, what's working, what's not working, but then base that grant program on, again, national standards and set standards for school safety that we want to achieve. That way we can actually track the money and achieve, we want to be able to achieve 100% of those standards. And that way, the grant program and the money that we spend, which is set aside right now, just as you characterized, but that's spent in an intentional way for us to achieve, a goal and those set standards. And those may be tiered out. It's just once we get those assessments back from our superintendents, then we'll be able to have a better idea and feel for where this money needs to go, how it needs to be spent. And I also want to broaden the conversation because school safety is not just about an active shooter drill or an active shooter scenario. It's about a safe environment for a child. And so when you think about what is a safe environment for a child, that includes a lot of different things. So it's not just about trying to prepare for one moment in time, which we pray never happens. It's that, but it's also about what is a safe environment for that child? What's going on? How do we utilize technology as effectively as possible to go in when we know that there's a kid at academic risk? We know how to go in with an intervention and say, hey, what's going on here? Let's correct your path so that we can get you out of academic distress and into, academic success. Well, I think there's also indicators within that school where a child might be struggling or maybe in need. And so being able to utilize technology to say, what can we bring to this child? We just need to pay more attention, to some of these kids that are struggling and why they're struggling and being able to intervene with that. I think that's also part of what school safety is for me.
A lot of people think school safety, they think lock on doors, SROs, school resource officers, but it's really, as the discussion has flared out, as you're mentioning, it does involve more. Unfortunately, it's gotten very complicated. And just a side note, I didn't mention that Senator Irvin is Senate Chair of Public Education. So, that gives you an idea of the depth of the knowledge base that she has and why she was the Senate sponsor on that bill, or on this bill we're talking about. But, in today's society, and everybody refers to this illustration, and literally true, when I was a kid, went to school, we had the gun in the gun racks, the trucks weren't locked, and
right.
Guys were able to carry knives, and if there was a disruption, usually you went out back on break, settled it, came back in, and you were better friends than when you started. One of the things I reference on the show is, from time to time, whether it's like had Representative Vaught dealing with mental health a while ago, a few weeks ago, and Representative Kavanaugh, or some of the guests I've had on that are suicide professionals that deal with that. It isn't as easy as it used to be in the complicated world that we live in, and society going to hell in a handbasket like it is.
Exactly.
And that's been brought into school.
It has. And so part of an initial survey that we have sent out on school safety through the adequacy process has been the number one response coming back, what are you most concerned with, or what are you dealing with the most in your school, is online bullying. That is the number one safety concern for their students is online bullying. And it's overwhelmingly the majority of the concern. Second, I think at 40%, so it's over 50%. I think it was like 53% from that survey of school administrators. Second was drugs and drug-related crimes at 40%. So, this is a huge broadened conversation about school safety and what this means, and making sure you have a safe environment. Safe environment means a safe campus, safe building, physical attributes, but a safe environment also means that, you need to have a presence there, and what is your culture in that school? And how can your personnel, how can your SROs, how can you improve that culture of respect, so that we can prevent, some of these things that are happening? And you talk about suicides. I mean, one of the reasons why, as some folks in this technology space created tools that we utilize now today, are because of the suicides that have occurred at other schools, where they said there were red flags after red flags after red flags. It's just that we never really sat down and talked about it and recognized those. Had we done that as school personnel and school administrators, we would have seen that little girl was struggling, and then we could have understood why and tried to prevent that little girl from committing suicide. I mean, that is such a tragic story, but it's just them saying we got to have a better tool for our disposal, so we have a dashboard to see what's going on here, and track these little red flags, not just put them in a desk somewhere, but really acknowledge them and go, what's going on here? And I think that's where we're at, and we used to do that, I think, pretty well sometimes, but
I think it was easier to detect years ago because you didn't have the amount of what you were having to deal with in school.
Yeah.
And so it was easier to detect that child that was having issues, so
Right.
that you could get to them quicker, or a teacher would pay more attention, whatever the case may be. Now, with the amount of problems that are poured into the school because of the amount of problems that kids have outside of school that are bringing it to school, I think it gets a little more complicated as far as being able to identify who they are until something, unfortunately, happens, such as what we've experienced.
Yeah.
Let me ask you, on the School Safety Commission, which I believe, correct me if I'm right, the governor established for the purpose of looking at this, so people know the timing of how things are going to play out. So we've set aside the $50 million, which just says that's untouchable until the School Safety Commission finalizes what will be their report that they're going to bring. Any ideas on when that will be, or when that report will be coming out?
So the assessment has been sent out, and we are awaiting the results of that. We have about a 50% response rate right now. I have them giving me a list of the schools that have not responded next week, and I'm going to start making phone calls to say, get your response in, and I'm going to utilize legislators to say, call your schools and your districts to get those surveys turned back into us by September 1st. Once that happens, we are going to conduct, we're going to have education committee meetings, and we're going to host those around the state. And we're going to go to schools, and we're going to see firsthand what some of these schools are dealing with. And so I look forward to that. But, I mean, we're going to go where there's some issues. And I think that we need to see that firsthand, and we need to understand that, and we need to experience that, I think, as legislators. And we also need to make sure that those students know we hear you, we recognize you, and teachers and their staff. We understand, why this school may not be as safe as another school, or why this school may be safer than other schools. So that's our plan of action. We got a lot of work to do between now and then. The commission's final report is due in October. And so, that gives us a little bit of time to really work hard and work fast to try to get all this put together. But I want to make sure that we take the results of that survey, we establish a baseline through the assessment, and that we create tiers of standards, and then how we're going to meet those standards and achieve those goals. So we got to have a grant program that's going to achieve something.
Which is this $50 million sitting out
That's
there
right.
to be able to apply
But
for
I don't
grants.
want a $50 million grant program that doesn't achieve anything, and we want to track it. So this is kind of lessons learned from grant programs that we've seen kind of go awry.
Didn't work out so well.
That didn't work out so well. But like, had we known, we could have said, okay, what is the achievable goal from this grant program? What do we want to achieve after? Is it 100% of our schools meet safety standard tier 1? We want 100% there. Those are goals that we can set and standards that we can set and then reach those goals.
And some schools may already be at tier 1, but until you get the assessment back,
you don't know.
at least have to have the first step toward the overall goal that
and
we
if
want
we
to
can
achieve.
check them off that list, and they can move down to tier 2. So, and then we can understand, I think, better the needs that are out there and making sure that we're using this money wisely and using it with advanced technologies. There's so many advancements in technology where they have artificial intelligence that can actually recognize if there's a weapon in a backpack, before that could ever come into the school, or so, and integration. I think integration is so important because you want to make sure that your system, whether it's a radio system or audio visual, whatever, is integrated into your local law enforcement's response time.
So go ahead. We'll talk about
so that you can reduce response time. And that is the key. If you did have an active shooter scenario, if you reduce your response time, you save more lives and you can act immediately. So very important that you don't just have a plan on a piece of paper that gets stuck in a drawer somewhere, but that you have an actual living, breathing plan that you are practicing, that you are coordinating with your local law enforcement officers and agencies, and that whatever system you have, if it's a radio or even audio visual or technology app, that it's integrated into those local law enforcement offices and agencies, and even perhaps integrated into the state's emergency response. And so there is a lot here that I think that we need to utilize, but I think the people of the state of Arkansas expect for us to really take advantage of, the technology that we have in order to keep their children safe. That is a good spend, in my opinion, of our state tax dollars, is integrating all of those systems. There's so many benefits to that because you can start collecting evidence. Like if something happened, God forbid, you can start collecting evidence immediately. It just saves lives, but it also helps in so many other ways. So I think there's just so much part of this conversation. We started the Safe School Initiative. I passed it in 2013. We've come a long way. That was just an initial response to what happened at Sandy Hook. But, I would be remiss if we didn't keep thinking about the places in Arkansas where we've had school shootings, which is Stamps, Arkansas, and at Westside near Jonesboro. And so, we have a history of it here in the state of Arkansas. So it's really a responsibility of ours to take it seriously.
Once the School Safety Commission comes out with the recommendation, then the department, just so people know the full process, then the department will be charged, which would be the Department of Ed, would be charged with drafting the rules whereby it would be, or maybe DFA or both, it'll be a team effort because this affects everybody. But the rules will then be developed as far as what is going to be the grant application and what you have to do to qualify to do it. That will be put out for public comment, and then it'll come through the rules, through ALC, and get approved. Realistically, probably looking November, December before the process takes place where those grants would be able to be applied for. You think that's realistic?
I think that's probably realistic. Yeah,
Okay.
We're going to move as quickly as we can. I promised the governor we would, but we want to just make sure we're thoughtful and intentional about how this is constructed. And it makes me, consider future grant programs. We need to make sure that they're intentional and that they're focused to achieve a goal.
And accountable 6
And
months.
accountable.
Yeah, there's a period after the grant has been awarded that we
Absolutely.
come back and can have some measurables that we can say, okay, where's the
Yes.
checklist, and let's see how it's
Yeah.
going. That's just good government.
What's
is what
the
that is.
measurables? What are the measurables here? What are we trying to achieve with this money?
Mm-hmm.
And I think, and how can we track that? How can we hold accountable to that? I think those are good things that we're learning along the way. But anyway, I think it's going to be a really great program. But it's going to start some conversations because some of these schools are located in places where it's tough, let me just tell you, and it's really also about community safety that's affecting what's happening at that school too. So it's economic development, the lack of economic development. It's maybe perhaps where a school is located. Bus routes. You want to talk about kids being, so a safe environment's not just on your campus, it's also on your buses. It's also when you go away at, sporting events or band events or whatever, what is the safe environment for those kids? So I think it's going to be the start of a really bigger conversation. And I think that's my hope.
And I don't mean to be pessimistic, but the reality is, as the return of the Lord gets near, this world is not getting better. If it was, he wouldn't have to come back. And the reality is, school safety is at front and center of the conversation, and it's here now and it's here to stay, because I don't see that this is a subject matter where we could ever afford to let our guard down.
Right.
And with the unfortunate events that have happened historically here in the state, but also around the nation, it is now at the forefront of the conversation, rightfully so. But I don't see a subject matter going away. I got to go into a break, and when we come back, we'll expand the conversation. We want to talk about the tax package that we were able to get passed this past special session, and to the benefit of the taxpayers, we were able to keep it to 3 days and 3 days only, which was a good thing. I do want to hit on this comment, and when we come back, we'll pick up on this. I think about the rural districts, which I graduated, like I said, Southside B Branch, which is right there on Highway 65. Your area is a big rural area. You mentioned a lot of small communities. The one thing I remember, and we'll talk about it in a minute when we come back, a meeting that I was sitting in this past week, was that, some of these schools don't have the benefit of police force that is either present immediately, too small to handle what would be a major outbreak, or they're 20 minutes away from the nearest sheriff's deputy if they don't have the benefit of the RSO. And so, or SRO, sorry. But when we come back, let's pick it up there, and we'll talk about that and expand it out a little bit. You're listening to the Kim Hammer Show here on 101.1 FM. The Answer. My guest today, at this time in studio, is Senator Missy Irvin, who is the chair of Senate Education. Just got passed this past week in the special session, a $50 million grant program for school safety. We're going to talk about the tax package, get down in the weeds on it when we come back. And come back, if you would, please, to the Kim Hammer Show. Welcome back to the Kim Hammer Show, and thank you for joining me here on 101.1 FM. The Answer, as I mentioned earlier, I've got Senator Missy Irvin in studio talking about the $50 million grant program that was set aside in special session, and we'll talk about the tax package in a minute. But Missy, I want to pick up on, I mentioned a meeting that I was sitting in this past week, and I know that you've been in communications, with the same group, but you talked about being able to integrate all the essential components that are necessary in order to provide school safety. And just to expand on that a little bit, that could be a walkie-talkie that is in the hands of the bus driver. It could be communication devices that are in the hands of everybody. One of the things I think that has been learned in other states and other situations is that multiple agencies might use different frequencies. So when an event goes down, you're in a situation where communication, which is key to getting the problem addressed and getting the resources there to get it nullified as quickly as possible, are not there. You take a school district that's sitting out in the middle of nowhere and does not have the presence of a police force, and they're just pretty much, and I'm going to go ahead and throw this one out there too, the ongoing discussion of should, school employees be allowed to carry guns or not. Personally, I'm okay with that, and I support that if the school, the board, the local, county government or the local government that's operating the school and teachers are willing to do that. I think that's fine because when you're in a vulnerable position, and you have nothing to defend yourself with, you're at risk. Some of the technology you referenced a while ago and how it would integrate into what you would see coming down as far as the overall plan. Expand on that a little bit if you would, because I think that's a critical component of what we're talking about.
Yeah, and so I talked to SROs, and I've been super engaged with this issue since 2013, and we've built our SRO, School Resource Officer presence. I speak at their convention that they have every year, the Criminal Justice Institute, which is part of the University of Arkansas Systems, actually, are really the forefront of that. Dr. Cheryl May is the director of that, and she leads our Arkansas School Safety Commission. But, you know, the SRO presence is really important, I think, but you can't overplay that presence, but you can't underplay it either. They have to have a balance, and there's so many. We actually give an award every year for the SROs that really kind of go above and beyond just their duties and really are creating a culture of just integrity, ethics, character, discipline. It's just remarkable what some of these SROs are doing in their schools and their programs, and they're really trying to increase pride in their schools and ownership for those students to have an ownership in their schools, and so it's amazing what some of them are doing. But to your point, there's so many rural districts. I mean, just making a list of the ones that I have, you know, the beauty of being able to represent that don't have an immediate law enforcement response time. So you're talking about like Viola, St. Joe, Rural Special, Timbo, Shirley, Norfolk. I mean, those are just the ones off Earl, Different Guy, Mount Vernon, and Enola. There may not be a police force right there, and so the response time is going to take a while. That's why it's really important to have this conversation about how you keep your campus safe and shorten your response time if something happens, if your local law enforcement officers are 20 minutes away. You know, if you try to drive from Mountain View to Rural Special, that's a good 20-minute distance, and it's up a very curvy hill with hairpin turns, and it is in one of the most rural areas of the state of Arkansas. Same with St. Joe and some of these other areas. But so those all things have to be part of the conversation. There was a bus that was shot at this year. There were kids on a school bus, and there was a shooting, and they shot at the bus. Nobody was hurt, thank goodness, but there was no local law enforcement to be able to respond to that. And they didn't even start investigating it until 3 days later because there was nobody available to be able to investigate it. I mean, these are kids that are out there traveling on bus routes in very rural parts of the state of Arkansas, and there's a shooting that occurs on a Friday, and they just can't get to it till Monday. That is unacceptable. Those are situations that we need to be aware of. There's another school where 5 students were shot and killed outside of the school. That is something we have to understand, and we have to meet this head on. And it's not pretty, but we have to address it and talk about it. And, you know, so what's going on in that community? Are kids getting hurt as they're walking to school, riding their bikes to school? There's still kids that do that, or riding a bus to school and getting off the bus, or getting onto a bus at a bus stop. Those are so many points of contact. So I think it's just such an important conversation to have, because not all one size fits all. It's just not a one size fits all approach. There's so many schools that are so isolated, and so lots of things are going to be talked about in the next session for sure.
You talk about that school bus issue. I think about, and I can't remember the name of the movie, but it's got Clint Eastwood in it, and the guy, you know, that crazy guy takes control of the bus.
Yeah.
You know, at the end, Clint Eastwood basically says, you know, do you feel lucky, punk? And he takes care of the problem.
Yeah.
But the reality is, when we're dealing with what people look to as far as what encompasses the responsibility of the school, at what point does the school become responsible for that child? Is it when they walk out of the door, they get on the bus, to the time, you know, that they get home? That's the period that we're covering. Yeah. And you know, we've got laws. You talk about the bullying online. We've got laws on the books that deal with that. But the one thing I think that people need to understand too is that the school can only do so much.
That's right.
And as long as we provide to the schools that period of time that they have that child entrusted to them from the beginning to the end of the day, that's the time that we're talking about.
Right.
People that listen to my show on a regular basis know that I harp on this. If we could get our home lives better,
Yes.
we wouldn't have the problems in school, because a lot of times
Absolutely.
those kids are bringing to school the problems, which brings in the subject of mental health.
Yeah.
What part of the package do you think is going to be a weighted component of how much is spent on mental health issues dealing with kids?
Great question. And I think, in previous legislation that I've passed, we've talked about certain people making sure that they are trained in youth mental health first aid, which is a great course. But we need to expand that out. But that training is free to the schools and to their personnel. We've just got to get people to take advantage of it. So I'm not, we're going to consider all those different things. There is already an Arkansas Thrives program at $10 million that's funded. There's another program that we fund. So we're going to put all those components together because there are already things that are already being funded and programs that we've already got put in place to kind of culminate it all together with this school safety grant program. So once we do the assessments, once we get all the information together, that'll drive those decisions.
All right, let me ask you one last question. We'll move on to the topic of tax cuts. With regards to, you talk about tier and, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, we want to do the assessment to know that everybody is at least at what tier 1 is. So talk about what tier 1 involves or represents in your mind. I know everything's got to play out from the commission. What would it take, or what does tier 2 look like, and then what does tier 3 look like as far as where we are right now? What's in your mindset?
Sure. So, I think, there are some schools that just struggle with just locks on the doors or just very basic things. And then there are some schools like Rogers that's fully integrated into the AWIN system. And I think they're the only school that has done that. And so what the AWIN system is probably one of the most, it's one of the most premier emergency radio network systems in the country. And we have spent
A lot of money getting there.
A lot of money, taxpayer dollars, building the AWIN system. And that's all over the state. We've got towers everywhere, and it's immediately connected to the Arkansas Department of Emergency Management and to the state police and, down the line. And so Rogers has fully integrated their entire system into that AWIN system. I think that's pretty incredible. There are such capabilities and technologies available to do those kinds of things, but it costs a lot of money. So, but to me, the student that's at Rogers and the student that's at Viola should be able to be safe, just as safe as one or the other. So those are conversations I think we're going to have. I think the assessments will come back and see where everybody's at. I don't want to spend money on zip ties and GoPros.
Right.
I want to make sure that we're really intentional so that we're not having to spend money twice 2 years from now.
Or on something that 2 years from now is going to be irrelevant,
Right.
out of date,
Right.
and it's a constant. You always got maintenance costs associated with anything, but
Right.
you want to get you want to get longevity out of whatever you're going to do.
Yeah, let's have a plan.
So let me get you to tier 2, but let me make this comment about the AWIN system, and that kind of goes back to what we said a while ago. So if an emergency call comes in and they don't have that common link, we'll call it, to be able to communicate with each other, what you've got is maybe the fire department's coming in on one frequency, you got the sheriff's department, you got the municipality, you've got state police. And the problem is that you got multiple phone calls, multiple devices being used to
Yep.
communicate the same,
Yep.
and you got redundancy, which means loss of
Yep.
time, loss of response. When you get everybody in that school system on the same frequency as all the key players that need to come in response to that,
Right.
then you got a command center that everybody's
Yes.
on one level, and it just makes a more efficient response, and you can terminate the threat quicker,
Absolutely,
Yep.
100%.
which not all parts of the state have that yet.
Correct.
Yep.
But we should utilize what we've already spent and invested money
Right.
into. I don't understand where we're not. And so, I think those are big conversations to have, and how much that would take, I don't know. But we've got to just make sure. key cards, or identification. Do you have a system that identifies who these people are? Do you have line of sight from somebody who's actually opening a door? Do they know who's coming in the front door? Or is the office built in the 1950s and, there's no window to know who's coming in or who's not? They don't have a camera system. They don't know who's coming in their building or not. And so,
Or do you know that a door's been left propped open?
Exactly. You don't know if the building, all those things, or have there been really intentional training and discussions about this? And even it gets down to like landscaping around your school, which is interesting.
Can somebody hide?
Can somebody hide behind the landscaping that you have? Or, there are things that there are experts out there that can look at a school campus and make an assessment and then make those suggestions of where you need to spend your money. And that's what I'm interested about, is just making sure we have standards and different levels to achieve that, and to make sure that we're all hitting baselines and then improvements as we can identify them and then just develop a plan and what we want to see. I would love to see full integration, because just like what you're saying, it reduces your response time, it will save lives, it will be more efficient response. You can start collecting evidence immediately. You have everybody connected at one instant. You've got one device. To me, that makes sense.
Yep. And some of this is just common sense that has maybe never been pushed to the forefront because we weren't having the need like we are now. So a lot of these things are just getting pushed to the front.
Sure.
Tier 2, what would you see Tier 2 looking like?
I think that is audiovisual cameras, artificial intelligence, those different kinds of levels of just really integration, and then fully utilizing technology and making sure that your plan, like I said, isn't not just a plan on paper, but that it's an ongoing, keeping yourself accountable and checking different things, more routine.
Auditing.
Yeah, but self-auditing. How can we help you create a system where you're checking things every day to say, we're gonna revisit this and we're gonna know exactly what's happening here. So not every school has that capability. Schools are, they're trying to focus on reading and writing and arithmetic. So this is a whole nother level of discussion. We need to look at how many schools have school resource officers, how they're being utilized, vape detectors. Those kinds of things. Because I say vape detectors because vaping is happening in schools, and we've had students where they've been rushed to the emergency room because of an illegal substance being put into a vape. And so, again, that's a safe environment situation. So there's all these different aspects. So all of the tiers aren't really developed yet, but this is just kind of my initial idea about how we need to really create an intentional focus for the grant program.
All right. Anything else about that subject matter you can think of?
I just want people to know that we're really taking this seriously. We are looking at all options that are available to us. I don't want to see this happen on my watch.
And I would want to make this point too. We're not looking to blame anybody. We just want to have a reasonable comfort level that if something happens, we've done everything we can do to know that we did everything we could do in order to provide and to protect. The reality is, if somebody gets it in their mind to do something, they're going to do it.
Right.
We just want to create as many barriers from their intent to the actual carrying it out, or to minimize it to its best. And I think that's kind of a process we're working toward, because quite honestly, right now, maybe we couldn't say that. Yeah, we've made strides. We got, we got successes, but it's one of those areas, and I think where sometimes entities get to where they relax.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like nobody does the tornado drill until the town next to you gets blown away by a tornado, and then all of a sudden everybody wants to do a tornado drill.
Right.
We can't ever live at the point again, I'm afraid, that we can be that lax.
That's
or
right.
or take things for granted.
Right, exactly. And they are not experts in school safety. That's why we have to rely on the experts in school safety to guide us with the recommendations, and we need to learn from the events that have happened, unfortunately, in our country, and those people that have analyzed that and studied that. And we use that as a guidance, and we say, okay, we understand your school board can't answer this question, but we've got parents asking those school boards and those superintendents to do something. I don't blame them, but we as a state have to really develop, I think, those standards and that policy for them so that we have kind of just a consistency across the state. And that's important to me.
Yep. And allow me a point of personal privilege. That's what we say in the Senate. Allow me a point of personal privilege. I want to give a shout out to my wife, Karen. She retired from public school education, taught first at Augusta, then Des Arc, and landed in Benton, her hometown, where she graduated from. 39 years of retirement from public school education. And this past week, she ran for the Benton School Board, and she is in unopposed, so she will be on the Benton School
Yay!
Board beginning the next election cycle.
That's awesome.
So,
Congratulations.
yeah, it'll make
That's
for
great.
interesting pillow talk when the senator
Yeah.
and the school board member.
Well, my husband actually ran unopposed for JP.
Yeah, see?
So
Hey, there you go. We need good people serving.
Yeah.
Find a place to serve.
JP in Stone
and get
County.
out there.
Go. I think I was more excited about his race than I was about mine.
Yeah. Well,
So it was exciting.
yeah,
so.
we can take the hits, but when your family is exposed to the potential
Yes.
hits, then it's just different.
It's different.
That's
It's
what
hard.
love does.
It's
All
different.
right,
It's hard.
let's finish up the Kim Hammer Show by talking about the tax package that we just passed. Your thoughts on the tax package?
Well, I'm so excited, and I think folks need to understand that this is a great example of where we put our minds to tax reform. We created a task force on tax reform. We put our minds to it. I was a member of that task force on tax reform. We looked at every single tax policy in the state of Arkansas, when it was passed, why it was passed, what that funding mechanism is, what it goes to. It's like this huge spider web, very complicated and hard to understand. However, I think what came out of that task force was the biggest bang for our buck was really to reduce income taxes. And so you want to tax what you want less of and don't tax what you want more of. Well, we want more people working. We want people to bring home more money of their hard-earned income. And so reducing our income taxes really is so important to our economic development, our economic viability for the future. And so lowering that, when we started, the individual income tax in the state of Arkansas, the top bracket was above 6%. And what we've just done in these past week is reduce that down to 4.9%, which is unbelievable. And that was our goal. I said back then, I wish we could get us below 5. And now here we are. We're below 5. I'm so proud. Why is that important? People listening have to understand. Tennessee is at 0. Texas is at 0. Mississippi is on a downward march to 4.4% by 2025. Missouri is on a downward march as well. Louisiana is on a downward march. Oklahoma's on a downward march. They're all lowering their income tax rates. So we have to be competitive with our neighboring states and within our region, and that's going to attract more people into our state. That builds your tax base if you can increase your population, and then people can pay less taxes if you increase your tax base. And so that's the way you increase your tax base, lowering that income tax rate. And then we lower the corporate tax rate down from 5.5% down to 5.3%. Again, making sure that we can retain businesses in the state of Arkansas, attract more businesses into the state of Arkansas, and they can create more jobs. I had a man who, as part of my Stone County Republican Committee meeting Tuesday night, and he said, you know, I raised my hand when you were running for office and Representative Gray was running for office, and I said, why should I keep my business here? And he said, now I can raise my hand and say, now I know why I need to keep my business here. Thank you for your work that you did. Because now I am justified in keeping my business here and creating the jobs that I create. So people understand this and they get it. We also gave a non-refundable one-time tax credit to folks that are making under $87,000, $150 as an individual and $300 as a married couple. And the result of all of this, 95,000 Arkansans now will not have to pay taxes, which is
And I want to hit
incredible.
some. And what's the top tax bracket down? 87,000 and below.
Yeah.
So the argument that people threw out as far as this is not helping the lower income was
Completely false.
completely false and shallow, to be honest with you.
Yes.
The one thing I want to go ahead and make note of, when you talk about the vote on this,
Yes.
to my knowledge, all the Republicans voted for it, all the Democrats voted against it, except for one. One crossed over and voted. But the bottom line principle was the vast majority, 99% of the Republicans
In the Senate, yes.
voted for it, and 99% of the Democrats voted against it. And that is an underlying statement that needs to be made and clarified before
Absolutely.
November.
Absolutely, absolutely. And like I said, there are some that did cross over. I know Representative Deborah Ferguson, because she lives in West Memphis and the border, so she understands this.
They understand
like,
that.
She gets it.
Right.
You know, but she's a Democrat, but she
I think
voted
Senator
for
Teague
it.
on the Senate side crossed
Well,
over and voted.
because down in Texas,
Yep.
you know, that whole area. So, yes, but vast speaking, the Republicans have been the ones that have led on tax reform. And we have cut taxes. And it goes back to Ronald Reagan. You cut the right taxes, and it's going to benefit you. You cut the right taxes, and you generate economic activity into your state. That is what we're seeing.
And that's why people, I think because of a conservative
Yes.
reputation that we have as a state.
Yes.
Now, I am concerned about people moving in from some liberal states
Yeah.
and what policies are they going to bring with them. And I think that is a realistic statement that one thing we got to watch for is to make sure that as our population grows, that the conservatives stay in control of the government in order to be able to do things like we've done this past week. But the other reason people are, and there's two things. Why are people moving in and why are people not moving out? And it comes down to, is this an affordable place to live? And taxes is a key part of that conversation.
Huge part of that conversation. Quality of life, but taxes is a huge part of that conversation. And so, you know, I think, and I would also say, these are things that we had already put in law. We just accelerated
it.
And so this was vetted policy. We had already placed these things in law. They had triggers, and what we did was we accelerated those triggers.
But what was also in the package, because we all worked together on it, was what was in the package was there's a trigger to stop it
Yep.
in the event economic growth. But the benefit of having a large catastrophic fund like we do is that we can slow the impact, which is unlike other states that are going to get it right in the face. We at least had the wisdom to put in there, trigger it if economic times turn hard, but the allowance to accelerate it in the event we're in a good time, which we're in a good time right now.
now.
You talked about complicated. Yeah, the tax structure is complicated. The one good thing about going after the personal income tax was it's the simplest way that you could give the greatest return to the greatest amount of working people.
That's right. That's exactly right. It was a way to let them keep more of their paycheck.
I got about 4 minutes left. I want to hit you some questions. You got 30 seconds or less on
Okay.
one
Lightning
of them.
round.
Lightning round. Here you go.
For all you Quizbo folks out there.
There you go. The first bolt of lightning is going to be this. If some people said, well, we're not going to be able to take care of government services and the things that we're doing or take care of increasing need of services by doing the tax cuts. 30 seconds or less response.
Look at our history. We have a track record and we have a great history of actually increasing funding where we have needed to increase funding to take care of all those needs. We just recently, through Arkansas Legislative Council, had the ability to increase payments to foster care families and to fictive kin who are taking care of foster children in the state of Arkansas. We are scheduled and slated to increase those payments across the board to everyone that's in that space by 10%. So that's a huge need in our state. We were just able to meet that obligation and that need, and I think that was above a $30 million request. We were able to meet it.
And only the rich folks got this tax benefit or the benefit of it.
No, that's absolutely not true because of the way that we have already front-loaded the tax reforms and the tax policies. We've actually already cut taxes over, I think, $170 million of tax cuts had already gone in place for the lower and middle income tax brackets that was effective January 1 of 2022. We had front-loaded this tax package and focused, and we put the folks that are in the low-income tax bracket and the middle-income tax bracket at the front of the line on our tax cuts. They had already been taken care of before this had occurred. And then we did extra for them in this tax package as well.
Last question, I'm down to about a minute and a half. This is going to prohibit us from being able to address teacher raises as the matrix discussion plays out and comes to its fruition in October, November when we go into budget hearings?
Absolutely not. We're working through the adequacy process, and that's a very complicated, another show for that discussion. It's very important that you understand all the expenses attributed to our schools and our school districts, and that you calculate all this together through one process, because that is how it's funded through this very complicated matrix funding formula. That has increased. I think that we heard today there's a $648 million carry forward. Yeah. $648 million pot of money sitting there waiting for us to pay for the adequacy recommendations.
All right. I'm out of time. This is Kim Hammer Show. My guest today in studio is Senator Missy Irvin, who is the chair of Senate Education. Missy, thank you for taking time out to be on the Kim Hammer Show. You can go up to my podcast on any of the platforms, Spotify, where you like to get your podcast. Listen to this again. Go up to my website, thekimhammershow.com. Please share it with your friends, and let's build the base as we move forward. Look forward to having you back next Saturday. Thank you for joining me today on the Kim Hammer Show.